A year before 9/11, the great New York columnist Jimmy Breslin said that Rudy Giuliani was, quote, a small man in search of a balcony. No one had a clearer understanding of New York characters than the legendary Jimmy Breslin. And for the people who today ask, what changed Rudy Giuliani? If Jimmy Breslin were still with us, he might answer nothing. Giuliani was always that way. Giuliani was the most overtly political U.S. attorney that New York City had ever seen. In 1986, when New York's Republican Senator Alphonse D'Amato was then the least qualified member of the United States Senate and running for re-election, Republican U.S. Attorney Rudy Giuliani created a public stunt for the senator's campaign at the senator's request, where they went undercover, as they called it, with the news media invited to watch and take photographs as Rudy Giuliani, disguised, he thought, as a bad guy in a Hells Angels jacket, hit the streets of New York with his sunglasses to buy crack. Giuliani was simply the goofiest U.S. attorney in the country and the most grotesquely political. With Giuliani's help, the Republican senator won his re-election campaign. Lost to memory by those who think there was something heroic about Rudy Giuliani rushing to the cameras on 9/11 is the chaos of the Giuliani mayoralty, during which he was caught having an affair with his press secretary. His wife kicked him out of Gracie Mansion, whereupon he was taken in as a house guest by a very charitable gay couple he was friends with. All of this and more played out on the front pages of the New York City tabloids. Kurt Andersen was covering all of this as a journalist in New York at the time, and he appears in the 4-part documentary series When the Truth Isn't Truth, the Rudy Giuliani story, which airs Sundays at 10 p.m. right here on MSNBC. And joining us now is Kurt Andersen. He is the New York Times bestselling author of Evil Geniuses, The Unmaking of America, and Fantasyland, How America Went Haywire. Kurt, I only wish Jimmy Breslin were still with us to join us tonight. I think we would both cede our time to him. The Giuliani story is a lot crazier than people realize, beginning a lot sooner than they realize.
Absolutely. I mean, we were covering him at Spy Magazine in the 1980s when he was U.S. attorney, a great U.S. attorney job in America as the Southern District of New York. And as you say, he was political, grotesquely political, as you say, even then. Not only did he do that absurd photo op of the crack buy with D'Amato, who was his political patron, but he invented this thing essentially, or certainly made it his signature, of the perp walk of for the cameras, making accused criminals, not convicted criminals, of course, walk in front of the cameras for the stunt of it. So that was all there. He was also, I mean, he was a strange man, right? I mean, there is a sort of operatic movie quality to his life. You know, he's the son of a robber and mafia enforcer, then becomes this Mr. Righteous prosecutor of Wall Street crooks and mafiosi, right? Okay, he's lucky as mayor because crime's going down before he becomes mayor. He's lucky at the very end because there's 9/11. He can take credit for the last 2 months of being mayor during that. And then he decides, I'm going to monetize my sudden reputation. And that's what he spends the next 20 years of his life doing, and going further and further into disgrace as finally as a kind of consigliere to the ultimate American gangster in Donald Trump. So that's my pitch.
Yeah, and one of the recurring battlefronts of his life has been divorce court, where they have been as dramatic and crazy and histrionic as a New York City tabloid divorce can be. But his first marriage was by far the most peculiar. He married a girl he grew up with, who was his cousin, who he then claimed he did not know was his cousin, when he went to the Vatican to get that marriage annulled, which he succeeded in doing, which men of certain positions were able to do in those days.
Yeah, that was strange, and of course it kept on. His marital life and the ends of those kept on being strange. He of course famously, while he was mayor, declared that his mistress, who became his wife subsequently, was taking over. In the first lady of New York City was being thrown out. She found out about it literally at a press conference that he gave, and then he moved out, as you said, and lived with his pals. And then, of course, the end of that marriage during the Trump administration, when he had just become Donald Trump's boy, in 2018, 2019, we learned there that he was spending $3 million a year on high living and including thousands and thousands of dollars on cigars and fountain pens in this swanky high life. And my favorite single most pathetic fact of that divorce settlement was he belonged to 11 country clubs. I can't stop thinking about that fact. He was so eager to have made it in the big time, and now he's fully in disgrace, and one doesn't know how more. If he is at bottom, it seems as though he is.